Emma used to run through the garden behind her house every morning before school with her shoes untied, and her long hair flying in the wind. She would laugh loudly, and her laughter would echo between the trees like a song that never ended. She was the kind of girl who made people smile just by walking into a room. Her eyes were bright, her voice was soft, and she asked questions about everything because she wanted to understand the world. Her father, Mr. Carson, was a very busy man. He ran one of the biggest companies in the city, and people respected him and feared him at the same time. He wore sharp suits, he gave big speeches, and he never showed emotion, but when it came to Emma, he turned into someone else. He would cancel meetings just to have breakfast with her. He would read her stories at night. Even when he came home late and tired, she was the one person who made him feel like a real human being again. Then came the rainy night. It was the kind of night when the sky looked angry and the roads were slippery with fresh rain. Emma was in the back seat of the car with her headphones on, humming a song to herself while her driver carefully made his way through the traffic. They were on their way back from a piano class she had begged her father to let her join just a few weeks before. No one saw the truck until it was too late. There was a loud crash, then silence, then screaming. The driver was badly hurt, but he survived. Emma did not move at all. She was awake, her eyes were wide open, but she could not feel her legs. She could not even move her fingers. She stared at the ceiling of the ambulance with tears rolling down her cheeks, as if her body had suddenly become a stranger to her. The hospital was cold and full of white walls and whispers. Doctors walked in and out of her room, shaking their heads, speaking in low voices to her father, who stood by the window with his fists clenched and his jaw tight. He did not cry, not once, but anyone who looked at him could see the storm in his eyes. Emma had broken her spine. The doctors said they did everything they could, but the damage was too deep. They said she might never walk again. Her legs would not respond. Her muscles were silent. It was like the lower half of her body had given up without warning. Mr. Carson refused to accept it. He brought in every specialist he could find, some from other cities, some from other countries. They came with machines and tests and promises, but none of them could fix what was broken. Each one left with the same words: "We're sorry, we've done all we can." Emma stopped smiling. She stopped asking questions. She stopped talking to anyone, not even her nurses, not even her father. Her room became quiet all the time. Her toys stayed in the corner untouched. Her books collected dust. She spent hours staring at the ceiling, just like she had that night in the ambulance. Her father watched her slip away day by day. He could not reach her, not with money, not with words, not with anything. He had power, he had connections, but none of those things could heal his little girl. He started working from home more often. He sat beside her bed for hours, reading her old stories. Even when she didn't respond, he played her favorite songs and held her hand, hoping for any kind of sign, but Emma just lay there silent, still frozen in a body that would not move. One morning, as he sat by her side holding a photo of the two of them laughing in the garden, she looked at him for the first time in weeks. Her eyes were full of tears, and she whispered just one sentence: "I miss running." That was the moment something inside Mr. Carson broke, or maybe it woke up. He knew he had to try something, anything, something different, something no one else had thought of. He needed a miracle, or maybe just someone who still believed in one. Days passed. Then a letter came. It did not come from a hospital or a doctor or a scientist. It came in a simple brown envelope with no return address, and inside was a piece of paper that changed everything. It said, "My name is Luke. I am a single father. I once had a son who could not walk. I helped him take his first steps again, not with money, not with machines, but with something else. I believe I can help your daughter too." Mr. Carson read the letter again, and again the words were strange and bold, and maybe even a little crazy, but they came with a photo of a boy standing tall, holding his father's hand, smiling under the sun. He didn't know why, but something about the letter made him pause. For the first time in weeks, he felt something he had not felt before. Curiosity. Hope, and maybe, just maybe, a reason to believe again. Mr. Carson sat in his office holding the letter again. He had read it at least 10 times, but he still didn't know what to think. The handwriting was neat, but not perfect. The paper was old. The message was short, but powerful. It didn't ask for money. It didn't beg for attention. It simply offered help from a stranger who claimed to heal without tools or fame or science. Most letters that came to Mr. Carson were requests for interviews, investments, or favors. But this one was different. This one spoke like a quiet voice in a dark room, a voice that was not loud but impossible to ignore. He looked again at the name at the bottom: Luke. No last name, no phone number, just an email and one photograph. In the photo was a man holding a small boy's hand. They stood in a field, both smiling. The boy looked strong and happy, not at all like a child who once could not walk. The man had tired eyes and a kind face. His smile was soft and humble, not proud, just real. Mr. Carson was not the kind of man who believed things easily. He trusted numbers, reports, science, not feelings, but something about this letter felt honest, not polished, not professional, just real, and that made it hard to throw away. He showed the letter to Emma's nurse. She raised her eyebrows, but said nothing. He showed it to a doctor who called it a joke, but Mr. Carson didn't laugh, not this time. He kept the photo in his jacket pocket all day, as if it carried some kind of quiet power. That night he sat beside Emma again. Her room was still the same, quiet, pale, empty. Her eyes stared out the window but did not blink much. Her hands lay still on the blanket. Her feet had not moved in weeks. She didn't ask for stories anymore. She didn't ask for anything. He reached into his pocket and took out the photo. He placed it gently on her blanket and waited. She blinked once, then again, then slowly turned her head. Her voice was soft like wind in the grass. "Who is that?" He told her about the letter, about Luke, about the boy who once couldn't walk just like her, and how now he ran and jumped and played. Emma stared at the photo without speaking for a long time, then asked a question her father didn't expect. "Can he help me too?" Mr. Carson didn't know the answer, but he sent an email that night. The message was short, just like the letter. He asked if Luke would be willing to come meet him and his daughter, and if what he said was true, if he could really do what no one else could. 2 days passed. Then came the reply. Luke agreed to come. He said he didn't want money or cameras or contracts. He only wanted a chance. And if after meeting Emma Mr. Carson didn't believe him, then he would leave quietly without another word. The next morning a small old car pulled up in front of the Carson estate. It looked out of place between the marble steps and polished cars. A man stepped out carrying one small bag. He wore simple clothes, jeans, and a faded jacket. His shoes were worn, his hair was messy, but his eyes were calm, steady, like someone who had been through storms and had learned to walk through them. Mr. Carson opened the door himself, something he never did for anyone. The two men stood in silence for a second, then shook hands. Neither one smiled, but something passed between them, respect, or maybe something deeper, something unspoken. Emma sat in her wheelchair when Luke walked in. She didn't speak at first, just stared at him. He didn't rush to talk or ask questions. Instead, he knelt down, looked her in the eyes, and said just 6 words. "I know how you feel, Emma." She blinked, surprised. No one had said that before. No one had looked at her like that, not with pity but with understanding. Luke asked if she liked music. She nodded. He pulled out a small speaker from his bag and played a soft song. The room felt different, warmer, like the walls were breathing again. He asked about her favorite games, favorite colors, favorite books. She started talking slowly, then a little faster, like a flower opening in sunlight. Mr. Carson watched quietly from the doorway, his chest tight. He had not seen Emma smile in weeks. Now her lips moved just a little and her eyes didn't look so far away. After an hour, Luke stood up and said he would return the next day to begin. He didn't promise results. He didn't promise miracles. He only said this. "I helped my son walk again, not by fixing his legs, but by helping him remember they were still his." Then he left with his small bag and old car, leaving behind a room that felt just a little more alive. That night Emma held the photo in her hands and whispered softly, "Maybe this time will be different." And her father, for the first time in a long while, whispered back, "Maybe it will." Luke came back the next morning just like he said. He wore the same jacket and the same tired shoes, but he carried something invisible, something stronger than money or medicine. He walked into the Carson home like he belonged there, not because he felt important, but because he had a purpose. Mr. Carson watched him carefully, still unsure, still waiting for proof, still scared to hope too much. He had been disappointed too many times before by smart people in white coats who promised big things and delivered nothing. But Luke was different. He made no promises. He carried no tools, only a notebook, a small speaker, and something in his eyes that looked a lot like faith. Emma was already awake when Luke arrived. She waited in her wheelchair near the window. The sunlight touched her face gently. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. When Luke entered the room, she nodded at him as if to say, "Okay, I'm ready." Luke didn't start with exercises. He didn't ask her to try and move or lift her legs. He sat beside her and started telling a story. It was about a bird that had fallen from its nest, and everyone said it would never fly again. But one day the wind changed and the bird decided to try anyway. Emma listened quietly. Her fingers moved just a little on the armrest of her chair, and when Luke finished the story, she asked what happened to the bird, and he said softly, "It flew, not because someone fixed it, but because it stopped being afraid of falling." Then he turned on some music, gentle music, not loud, not sad, just warm, like a hug for the heart, and he asked Emma if she would try to move her toes just once, just for a second, not to impress anyone, not to win anything, just to tell her body that she was still there. She tried. Nothing happened. Luke said, "Good job." She looked confused, but he smiled and said, "Trying is already more than giving up. Trying is already brave." Every day Luke came back, and every day they did something new. One day they played music, one day they painted, one day they just sat outside in the garden with the wind in their hair and the sound of birds above them. Emma laughed once, just a small laugh, but it made Mr. Carson step outside and wipe his eyes where no one could see him. Luke never raised his voice, never rushed, never acted like a teacher or a healer. He was just their steady, kind patient, like a lighthouse in the dark, waiting for the waves to calm. He asked Emma questions about her dreams before the accident, about the things she missed the most. She said she missed the feeling of grass under her feet, the feeling of running without thinking, and the way her dad used to chase her across the yard pretending to be a monster. Luke nodded and said memories are not just in the mind, they are in the muscles too. Your body remembers joy, it remembers movement, even if it forgets for a while, we just have to remind it. One day he brought his son Jamie with him. Jamie was a little older than Emma and full of energy. He ran across the living room like lightning and stopped beside Emma with a big grin. He said, "I couldn't walk once either." Emma stared at him in surprise, then looked at Luke, then back at Jamie. "You're the boy from the photo." Jamie nodded and sat beside her. He told her about the long nights, the pain, the fear, and how his dad never gave up on him, even when everyone else did, even when he wanted to quit, even when he thought walking was just a dream. He told her that the first step is not with your feet, it's with your heart. Emma didn't say much, but after Jamie left she looked at Luke and whispered, "I want to try again tomorrow." Luke said, "That's all I need." That night Mr. Carson stood by Emma's bed and watched her sleep. Her hands were not curled up like before, they were relaxed, resting on her blanket, as if her body had finally started to breathe again. He walked down the hallway and found Luke sitting in the garden under the stars. He sat beside him in silence for a long time, then finally asked a question that had been sitting in his chest since the first day. "Why do you do this?" Luke looked up at the sky, then said quietly, "Because I know what it feels like to watch someone you love lose hope, and I also know what it feels like to get that hope back." Mr. Carson didn't reply, but he understood more than ever that this man had nothing to prove, because everything he did came from love, not pride, not ego, not glory, just love. And maybe that was the thing they all needed the most. The morning was quiet, the sky was soft and gray, and the house felt still, like it was holding its breath. Emma sat in her wheelchair near the window, watching the trees move in the wind. Her hands were resting in her lap, but her eyes were alert. Today was different. She knew it. She could feel it in her chest. Something was coming, and it felt both exciting and a little scary. Luke arrived early with a small speaker in one hand and a folded blanket in the other. He smiled at Emma and said, "Today we try something new." She raised her eyebrows but didn't speak. She trusted him now more than anyone, but that didn't mean she wasn't afraid. He placed the blanket on the floor and said, "I want you to lie down here just for a few minutes, not to move, just to feel the floor again, to feel the world beneath you." Emma hesitated for a second, then slowly nodded. Mr. Carson helped lift her gently from the chair and laid her on the blanket. Her body was stiff, her legs felt like stone, but she did not cry. She looked up at the ceiling and waited. Luke sat beside her and started the music. It was slow, peaceful, like the sound of rain on leaves. He asked her to close her eyes and take a deep breath, then another. He told her to picture her legs not broken, not silent, but sleeping, just sleeping. Now he said, "I want you to talk to them in your mind. Tell them it's time to wake up. Tell them you are not angry with them, not scared of them, not ashamed of them. Tell them you love them and that you miss them." Emma's eyes stayed closed, but her fingers curled slightly. She breathed deeper, and for the first time in weeks she felt something, not pain, not movement, just warmth in her lower back, like a small fire trying to start. Luke noticed. He didn't say anything, he just kept the music going and said, "Now I want you to try something very small. Try to move your toe, just one toe, even if it doesn't work, just try it anyway," like whispering to someone far away. Emma tried her face, tensed, her jaw tightened, nothing happened. Then she tried again, still nothing. Her breath got shaky, her eyes opened wide with frustration, her voice cracked as she said, "It's not working." Luke leaned in and whispered, "But you tried, and that is more than most people ever do on their worst day." Tears rolled down her cheeks, not because of pain, but because trying and failing hurt more than she expected. Her father reached for her hand, but she pulled it away, not angry, just overwhelmed. She turned her face to the side and cried silently. Luke didn't stop her. He let the tears fall like rain after a long dry season. He sat quietly beside her, letting her feel every bit of that sadness, because sometimes before hope can grow, the pain has to come out. After a while she wiped her face with her sleeve and whispered, "I want to try again." Luke smiled gently and said, "Of course." They tried every day. Some days were good, some were not. Some days she moved a finger, some days she moved nothing at all, but every day she showed up. Every day she listened to the music and talked to her legs and trusted Luke to guide her through the storm. Mr. Carson watched this with growing wonder. He didn't understand the method fully. It made no sense to him. No machines, no charts, no magic pills, just music, breathing, and quiet courage. But day by day, he saw changes, not in her body at first, but in her spirit. Emma was laughing again, even if just a little. She was asking questions again, drawing pictures again, asking for her favorite songs again. Her body was still slow, still heavy, but her heart was waking up. One afternoon, after a long session, Emma asked Luke, "Why do you help people like me?" He paused, then said, "Because I know how heavy it feels to carry a body that no longer listens, and I also know how powerful it feels the first time it finally whispers back." Emma didn't answer right away, but later that night she told her father, "I think my legs heard me today, just a little." Mr. Carson held her hand tightly and whispered, "Then keep talking to them." The next morning Luke arrived with something new, a short wooden bar fixed to a frame. He called it the standing station. He said, "Today you will feel the earth under your feet again, not by walking, not yet, but by standing." Emma looked nervous but nodded. Her father helped lift her. With Luke's guidance, her legs shook as they were placed on the ground. She grabbed the bar and closed her eyes. She stood for 3 seconds, then collapsed back into the chair. She cried again, not from failure but from the shock of standing after so long, the pressure, the fear, the flood of feelings. Luke knelt in front of her and said, 3 seconds is enough for today, and tomorrow we will try for 4. That night, Emma wrote something in her journal for the first time since the accident. It said, "Today I stood. And I didn't fall alone." The morning sun came through the window like gold. Emma was already awake, sitting in her wheelchair with her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes were quiet, but her mind was full of thoughts. It had been weeks since Luke arrived, weeks of music, breathing stories, quiet tears, and small moments of victory. She was tired but also stronger than before. Mr. Carson walked into the room carrying a cup of warm tea and sat beside her. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at her face and saw something new, not the sadness that used to live there, not the fear that once filled her eyes, but something different, something bright, something ready. Luke came at his usual time, wearing his usual clothes, his usual tired shoes, and the same gentle smile he always carried. He greeted Emma and placed the soft blanket on the floor like he always did, but today he added something else, a thin walking bar fixed between 2 small poles. Emma looked at it and then looked at Luke. "Is today the day?" He nodded slowly. "Only if you are ready." Emma took a deep breath and nodded too. Mr. Carson stood close by, his hands shaking just a little, his heart beating faster than it had in years. He didn't know what was going to happen, and that scared him more than anything, but he stayed quiet and watched. Luke moved slowly. He helped Emma onto the floor with care, every movement gentle, every word calm. He placed her hands on the walking bar and said, "We will not try to walk today. We will only try to lift your body, feel your weight, and tell your legs they are still part of you." Emma nodded again. Her face was pale, but her eyes were burning. Luke turned on the music, a soft, slow tune that filled the room like warm water. He whispered to her, "One step at a time, one breath at a time." She closed her eyes and held the bar tightly. Then she pushed down with her arms. Her legs wobbled. They did not hold her for long, but they tried. Her feet pressed against the floor and her knees bent just a little. She fell back onto the blanket, but she did not cry. She looked at Luke and said again. They tried again and again, each time holding on a little longer, falling a little slower, breathing a little deeper. Then it happened. Emma pushed again, but this time her legs did something new. They held her for longer than before. Her back straightened, her hands tightened around the bar, and her whole body lifted higher than ever before. Mr. Carson covered his mouth, his eyes wide with shock. Emma stood there for 6 full seconds before her legs gave out and she gently fell into Luke's arms. The room went quiet. Then Emma smiled, not a small smile, a full, real smile, the kind that takes up your whole face and makes your eyes shine. Luke smiled too and whispered, "Now your body remembers what it feels like to stand tall." Mr. Carson stepped forward and knelt beside his daughter. He didn't say anything, but his eyes were wet and his hands shook as he touched her shoulder gently. Emma whispered to him, "I did it, Dad." "You did," he whispered back, "and I am so proud of you." The next day they tried again, and this time Emma stood even longer, and the day after that she stood and moved one foot just a little forward, and on the 4th day she moved both feet and stood without help for 10 whole seconds. The progress was slow, but it was real, and every day she became more confident, more alive, more like the girl who used to run in the garden and laugh so loud that even the birds stopped to listen. One afternoon Luke arrived with a new challenge, a short hallway with rails on both sides. Emma looked at it, then looked at Luke and asked, "Do you really think I can do this?" He smiled and said, "I don't think I know." With her hands on the rails and Luke beside her, Emma took one step. Her leg shook, but it moved forward, then the other leg followed. It was slow, like watching a baby deer learning to stand, but it was powerful. She took 5 full steps before sitting back down, her whole body shaking but her face shining like sunlight. Mr. Carson clapped quietly from the doorway, his heart full, his soul shaking. That night Emma looked at her reflection in the mirror for a long time. She touched her legs gently and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." And deep inside her she felt something shift, something awaken. She was no longer just the girl who couldn't move. She was now the girl who took her first step. And the world would never be the same again. Emma was walking. Not far, not fast, not perfect, but walking step by step, breath by breath, her legs shaky, her arms steady, her heart strong. She moved through the house with rails on both sides of the hallway, her father walking behind her in quiet wonder and Luke always beside her, calm and patient like always. The house that once felt cold and silent was now full of music and laughter and the soft sound of feet touching the floor again. Emma laughed more now. She drew pictures, she sang in the mornings, she asked to go outside and feel the sun on her face and the wind in her hair. She didn't want to hide anymore, she wanted to live. And she did. Mr. Carson changed too. The busy meetings, the long phone calls, the late-night flights, they didn't matter as much anymore. He stayed close to Emma. He cooked breakfast, he walked with her in the garden, he learned to breathe again just like she had. One morning Luke didn't show up. It was the first time since he came into their lives. Mr. Carson waited by the door with worry in his eyes. Emma waited too, dressed and ready, her hands on the rails, her feet tapping gently like they were eager to move. But Luke never came that day. Or the next. Or the day after that. No message, no goodbye, no reason. Just gone. Emma was quiet that first day, her smile a little smaller, her steps a little slower, but she did not give up. She kept walking, kept stretching, kept breathing. She played the same music Luke had used and followed the same steps he had taught her. Mr. Carson searched for him. He called the email address, but there was no reply. He drove to the return address on the envelope, but found only an old mailbox and a neighbor who said the man had moved months ago. It was like Luke had never been there at all. Except he had. Because Emma was still walking. And not just walking, she was living, standing strong, going back to school, slowly going outside without fear, standing in front of mirrors and seeing someone brave looking back at her. Months passed. Then one morning a letter arrived, no name on the front, just a simple envelope, and inside a short message written in the same familiar handwriting. It said, "I never meant to stay long. I only come where I'm needed and leave when I'm not. Your daughter already has everything she needs. Thank you for trusting me." At the bottom was a drawing, a stick figure of a girl standing tall and smiling under the sun with the words "You did it" written beside it. Emma held the paper close to her chest and smiled. She didn't cry. She didn't feel sad. She just whispered, "Thank you, Luke, wherever you are." Later that year, Emma stood on a small stage at her school, speaking in front of her classmates for the first time since the accident. She talked about strength, not the kind you see in muscles or speed, but the kind that lives in your heart, the kind that keeps going even when it hurts, the kind that grows in silence and shines in the dark. She talked about the stranger who came into her life and taught her how to breathe again, how to listen to her body, how to remember that her legs were still hers even if they forgot for a while. She didn't say his name. She just called him the man who helped me find myself. The room was silent, then filled with applause. Mr. Carson stood in the back row, his hands clapping slowly, his eyes full of quiet tears, not of sadness but of pride and peace. Emma stepped down from the stage and walked across the room without help, without rails, without fear, her head held high, her steps soft but steady like music. Outside the sun was shining the same way it did the first day she stood. She walked through the garden again where she once used to run when life was simple, before the crash, before the silence, before everything changed. Now everything had changed again, but this time for the better. She stood in the middle of the grass, looked up at the sky and smiled. In her heart she could almost hear a quiet voice saying, "One more step." And so she took it, because the girl who couldn't move was now the girl who kept moving. And somewhere far away, maybe in a small town or a quiet street or a place full of birds and sunshine, a man with tired shoes and a quiet smile sat under a tree holding a photo of a girl standing tall. He didn't need thanks. He didn't need medals. Because he already knew. He had given her back her life.